Hey you guys, this is Josh.
And Carolyn.
With Homesteading Family, and welcome to this week's episode of the Pantry Chat Food for Thought. This week we are covering
homeschooling and considerations if you are thinking about homeschooling.
Absolutely. There is a lot happening in the world today.
Yep.
I know our country's saying we're going to go back to school, but
Yep.
there's a lot of challenges, and a lot of you are thinking and considering homeschooling. So we're going to give you some food for thought here. All right, so before we get into main topic, we usually have a little chit chat and answer a question of yours.
But if you want to skip the chit chat and just go straight to the main topic, check the description where we have everything timestamped for you so you can jump right into the discussion about homeschooling.
You betcha. So what's going on? What's up with you right now?
You know, a huge challenge for me, and I think probably for every food preserver, especially people who live in short growing seasons like we do. We kind of have a real short window where most of our growing and harvesting and preserving happens, is getting it all in through the year. And so I'm really learning from the past few years. I'm finally learning from my mistakes and remembering to start as early as I can and start harvesting what I can as early as I can. And the first thing that's ready here for me is the culinary and the medicinal herbs.
Right.
So I have a lot of those ready. Obviously things that I'm going to harvest for roots, some of those medicinal herbs, those have to wait all the way till the fall, till things die back. So those will be one of the last things. But right now, the oregano, the peppermint, the thyme, the monarda, there's a lot of things out in the garden that I'm able to harvest. So I'm really trying to get a jump on the season, get that done now instead of waiting all the way to the end when I'm scrambling against fruit being ready and vegetables being ready and everything being ready at the same time. So
Yeah.
I have been doing a lot of herbal preparations, different ones, mostly culinary this last week, harvesting the herbs, drying them. We're making herb salts. We're making some extracts like peppermint extract. So we're doing all sorts of different fun things, tea mixtures, different stuff that we'll want this winter. So.
And if you haven't seen Carolyn's cottage garden,
Yeah.
I think we just released a tour of that, updated. This is in its second year, and it is just blooming wonderfully.
I was telling the kids, I feel like I'm in Lilliput when I'm in that garden because these herbs are like it makes me feel very small being out there, and it's a lot of fun.
That Elecampane is just gigantic. The catnip, I've never seen catnip like that. It's like
never
4 or 5 foot tall.
I know. They say in the descriptions, you know, that's like a 2 foot tall plant, 3 foot tall maybe. And this thing's about over my head now. It's getting really big.
Well, and I didn't really expect that much out of this garden, but I got to tell you, just the method that we used in converting sod into this garden, which we have a video on, we'll link to it below. I don't remember the title of it. Just worked super, super well.
Yeah.
And
because the space that the cottage garden is in right now was just lawn. That's all it was.
Just a year, not even a year and a half ago. Last May it was still lawn.
Right. Last year, in its first year, the garden grew really well, and this year it's just out of the out of the park. It's really
but that's
amazing.
putting you to work because now you've got a lot of herbs to harvest.
I do, and I'm getting what I need, and then I'm excited because this year I'm actually going to be able to call my friends and say, hey, do you want some herbs? I have everything that I need. So that's always something that I like getting to do is pass around the goodies, right?
Well, you're going to have enough for like an Etsy shop or something?
I could probably do some of that too, but I'm a little busy to do the shipping part of all that. So, so I'm really excited about being able to share my excess, the surplus,
very
right?
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
What about you? What have you been up to?
Well, you know, talking about that harvest and trying to spread out the harvest, of course, we have worked more and more to plan the garden to where we are extending our planting throughout the year so that we're spreading the harvest out so it doesn't all hit at once, right?
Yeah.
So let's see. I just planted all of our fall harvest carrots, beets, and parsnips.
Yes.
That was a lot of them, yeah.
It was a lot. We have a lot of rows of those.
We do, like 180 feet of each, I think.
Okay, good.
And so we've planted some carrots and beets earlier that we're just about ready to harvest.
Yeah, those are for fresh eating.
And some pickling some of the small beets.
Oh, yeah. We love those pickled beets.
Yeah, so I've got all that in and planted another row of spinach because we just used up our last one. And so doing that. And so, guys, that's a real good tip to remember for both fresh eating and just spreading out your work is you should be planting continually, like once a week. Plan your garden to always be getting something in, staggering when you're planting and harvesting, both for preservation crops, like your roots that you might be putting in a cellar, or other things that you're going to can, like your beans, maybe your corn. Try to stagger that stuff, but also be planting fresh eating throughout the season. I try to do that at least once a week. Sometimes I only get to it every other week, but once a week is really helpful. That keeps us in fresh eating all through the season. So,
which is wonderful.
Yeah, so been doing that. Of course, we're clearing an area behind the barn because we need a barnyard. We're temporary fence, kind of an area that was very overrun in vegetation. So. We're getting that cleared out.
Yeah, if you remember when we moved to this property, it had been kind of neglected for a few years. It had lost some of the maintenance that needed to be kept on it. And there's an area where the forest was taking back over the areas around the barnyard, around the barn. So we're needing to clear that out and make some room for the beef cows?
Well, the bull's coming back.
The bull is
at
coming
least,
back.
And maybe the rest of the beef cows by the fall.
Yeah, so we have our milk cow here on the property all the time. She's pretty much always with us. And for obvious reasons. And then we have the beef cattle, but we don't quite have enough grazing on the property for the beef cattle yet. So they are on somebody else's pasture. So the bull has to kind of go back and forth between when we need him for the dairy cow.
Come and hang out with Tilly for a while here. It's about time.
Yeah,
Make
and
a baby.
then he's back to the beef cows when it's time for that.
Yeah.
Or it's kind of opposite.
It's reversed
he starts at the beef cows and coming.
It's reversed this year.
So we need a spot for him to
We do. And so we were going to take that area, and I was going to do a slow transition and use some of the sheep and pigs to take that down. But because of all these things, we needed to accelerate that. So we're just getting it cleared out.
Getting it done.
And getting the barnyard going. So
Great.
Lots going on around here.
Yay.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Let's move on to the question of the day. But first, an announcement. We were realizing we have been doing a ton of IG stories, and you guys often ask us, little questions about this or that, things in the garden. Things that are going on around here, and we can't always film long videos on them for the way things work for us, but we've started to do a lot of stories on Instagram to give you little glimpses of what's going on here and there and little tips and tricks. And so realize that this stuff isn't getting posted on YouTube. So if you're a YouTube follower and you're not following us on Instagram or Facebook, particularly Instagram is where the stories are. And there's a lot of good information there, a lot of good tidbits of knowledge, and plus seeing around little nooks and crannies in the farm and what's going on in the garden. So just wanted to let you guys know about that, because I know we get questions on YouTube about this and that, and I go, well, I did something on that, but it was just a little short, or you did. So if you haven't subscribed to IG, you might want to check that out. Instagram. For some people I say IG.
I think we're doing a new story pretty much every day over there.
There is a story every day that's anywhere from 30 seconds to, minute and a half or 2 minutes.
Like
and a lot of them have good tidbits of knowledge and little peaks in the areas around. So check that out. Okay.
All right, good.
And another thing we're getting ready to start, but let me answer this through a question. Stacy Coupland on Choosing a Homestead Property asked, these pantry chats are so valuable. Is there a way for you to offer these chats in an audio-only version that can be downloaded? And we have a solution for you, don't we?
Yay! We're going to turn the Pantry Chat into a podcast, or also a podcast. You'll still be able to watch the video. It may get a name change. We're not sure yet. But it will still be the Pantry Chat, even if it has a new name. But you'll also be able to listen to it as a podcast on all the main podcast broadcast.
Yeah, I'm sure
things,
iTunes.
apps. I don't know what you call them.
Yeah, iTunes
Channels,
will be the
stations,
main one. I'm not sure the other ones, but we have a team that we're working with to produce that, so that's really exciting. So this is going to be done well.
Yes.
There may be a few format changes, depending, because we have to make both. I mean, we're going to keep the video going, and some of these are also going to be turned into blog posts, depending.
Yes.
So we're trying to make sure you've got video, audio, and even
written notes.
Yeah.
Yay!
So very cool. So there you go.
So that should be coming by mid-August, hopefully.
Right.
If we can keep all of our ducks in a row.
I think there's an introductory coming early August, and then we get into a flow by mid-August.
So just keep listening for announcements. Yep. We'll keep you up to date.
Keep you updated. So there you go. Thanks, Stacy.
All right.
Glad we can help. Okay, so main topic,
is
homeschooling. And there's a lot going on in the world today. A lot of people have already been pushed into dealing with some form of homeschooling, just kind of impromptu because of all the current events.
Right.
And it's been challenging. And now that looks like it's going to go on.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people trying to figure this out and decide what to do. And,
yes. Absolutely. Well, whether you're thinking about homeschooling because you're concerned for maybe a high-risk family member and you don't want to bring an infection into the home, or because you're concerned about the level of education that your student is getting with this kind of on-again, off-again, trying to figure it out school, or just because you're worried about the consistency and you just need to know what's going on and like what you're doing today versus tomorrow, and not have this kind of in school a few days and out of school a few days that a lot of school systems are talking about.
Right, and I was going to say, that's what I think a lot of people are going to be facing. As I'm reading the news, as we talk to people all over the country, both friends and you guys that we engage with, and hearing the stories, there are so many different applications of this, and federal government saying everybody's got to go back to school. I mean, that's what they're saying right now. It's going to happen, but how it happens is totally unknown.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me very challenging. I mean, they're talking about some days in school, some days at home, some days on video, all kinds of things, and that's going to be a challenge to deal with.
It is.
So
I know that a lot of people, because of these challenges, are then turning to the idea of homeschooling, especially if you have been thinking about it already. This might be your good push to get you actually stepping into homeschooling. But I want to tell you right now that what you probably experienced in the spring with the public schools shutting down and trying to figure out their program and the confusion that happened around that is not a good representation of homeschooling. Okay?
Right.
That's a representation of some form of chaos as everybody's trying to respond to an emergency.
Understandably so.
Absolutely, understandably. But that is not what homeschooling is going to look like if you have some time to think about it, get your systems in place, and do what works for you. So we're going to be talking about some of those things today.
It doesn't need to look like that, but you do need to get prepped because it can be very chaotic. It is challenging. It is a whole other element of life, and so there's definitely some resources and some things to consider if you are considering going down this road or being pushed down this road.
Absolutely. Yeah. Do you ever wish that we were not homeschooling?
Very rarely. I mean, there's moments where we've got a big active house and, you know, just to be honest, some days it's like, oh, this would just be a lot easier if,
absolutely,
if everybody was in school.
Absolutely.
Because it is an integral part of life. But that is a selfish, I'm wiped out, I'm tired, thing that is not really a deep wish. Because no, I love our life. I love the education that the kids are getting. I love the involvement that they have here on the home and the integration that education is giving them, because they're getting a lot more than just classroom schooling.
Yes.
They're getting a lot of life experiences that we value a lot, from the homestead to the entrepreneurship to them getting out and doing other kinds of activities that are educational that would be very difficult to do in the structured public school system.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. I think it's one of the best decisions we've ever made in terms of family. Is having them at home, homeschooling them. I think the way that homeschooling supports character growth is just outstanding. It is amazing because you have a parent watching them all the time. You're seeing every little bit. A lot of times people will say, your children are so well behaved, and I'll say, well, they're homeschooled, they have to be, otherwise I couldn't put up with them all day long. I say it kind of as a joke, but there's truth there, is that as a parent, there are things you're just not going to put up with.
They're also it's a smaller environment. Most kids are in a 30 to 40 person classroom,
right?
So you just don't get the same level of attention or even correction, guidance when it's needed as happens in the home.
Yeah.
Now, I I do want to say, because one of the big beefs that people have with homeschooling is that the kids don't get enough exposure to things and don't get enough socialization.
Right.
And I kind of like to just wipe that off the table, because that can be true. There are people that are very cloistered, very sheltered, and there can end up in some environments a lack of social structure and experience. And we definitely would not support that and don't do that. So that does happen, and that is a valid concern. However, that's not because of homeschooling. That's because of a personal choice of way it gets done.
Well, and I want to say, as a teacher, as somebody who taught in the schools before we had our own children, there are just as many unsocialized children in the public school setting as I have ever met in homeschool circles.
Right.
Because it's a personal choice, because it has more to do with the household and family culture and structure than it actually has to do with how a child is educated.
Right, and that's some people's choice, and I don't really even fault them for that. But you can be very engaged, you can be very social. In fact, you can create a lot more variety of social experiences and engagement, which is what we value. Right. And what our kids experience with the different people that they interact with, both in age and life experience. Right. That really speaks into their life and fills things out. So I wanted to start there, because a lot of people think that homeschooling means the sheltered, cloistered, everybody's at home and they're not getting exposure to the world.
Right.
And that's just not necessary, and in our opinion shouldn't be. It doesn't need to be that way.
Absolutely.
So
okay, well, you can tell this is something we're fairly passionate about, because we're already all over the place, because we just love homeschooling and we've seen what it's done for our family, and we just feel like it's so valuable. But let's get down to some of the nitty-gritty stuff here that we wanted to talk about. Number one, we kind of touched on it a little bit, is that homeschooling does not need to look like a replication of a public school.
Right.
Your homeschooling does not need to be an exact cookie cutter of whatever your local public school is doing, but you do need to know your local state laws on what you're required to do to legally homeschool.
Right, and when you start homeschooling, there is a burden to feel like you have to conform to what you know, to what you experienced, and you do need to conform to getting them a good education, and I differentiate that from schooling. They need a good education, and so you want to make a judgment about that, but like Carolyn said, you want to understand the law in your state.
Right.
And a great resource for that is the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, hslda.org. We'll put a link down below.
Great.
Tons of free resources, and one of the first things that you can do is you can go there, and they have all the legal stuff about each and every state. So you can go find out, even if you're just thinking about it, you can go look at your state and say, what does my state require of me to do this? That is like the number one thing you need to know. I mean, besides your own willingness, but because every state's different, and you do have to meet those requirements.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see if there's a lot of changes made in the laws coming up here with COVID to give people more options. Some states it's very, very hard to homeschool. I'll be real curious to see what happens this fall, if there's some changes made to those
There may need to be some accommodation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And because from everything we're hearing, the homeschooling associations all over the country are totally overwhelmed right now because people are looking into this. And can I give just another suggestion on resource? HSLDA is a national and even worldwide resource. But then you want to start looking into your local resources. They may have local chapters. There may be other local chapters. And I guess we'll probably talk more a little bit in a moment thinking about that. But
so moving on is that you need to create a system that works for you within those laws. Now, I've had a lot of people say to me, well, homeschooling is okay for you because you used to be a teacher. You're a trained teacher. And I've got to tell you, being a trained teacher is the biggest handicap that I have encountered to homeschooling.
And why is that?
Because in my mind, everything should look just like a classroom.
Because that's what you were taught.
That's what I was taught.
Right.
It was really hammered into us exactly what that should look like. Your homeschool does not need to look like a classroom. There's no benefit to that at all. What the important thing is the education that happens behind it. Education can happen on your couch, at your dining room table, in the evenings, in the mornings, on the weekends. It can happen in all different times, places, and ways, as long as you're meeting those goals of those educational goals and also meeting, of course, those state laws.
Right. So that's where a difference between education and schooling comes in. There is time for school. There is time for book learning and memorization and the tests, and that's a big part of it. But I think a key component or philosophy, at least for us, is that education is something that is always happening. It's a part of life.
Right.
We want our kids to come away naturally desiring to educate themselves.
Yes.
A lot of schooling burns people out, and they're like, done. I don't want to learn anything. I don't want to read books. I just want to go do my job and get entertained.
Right.
We want people to understand that they can educate themselves and that they love to learn. And so that's something that's happening all the time, hopefully, but we have to be cognizant of that and looking for those opportunities along with providing them.
Yeah. So this means when you're making it yours, when you're making homeschooling your own, it means that you get to pick a lot of things. Don't think that you have to stick to a traditional school schedule in terms of the months of the year or the times that you homeschool. For us, on a homestead and integrating homeschooling with homesteading, I find that sometimes of the years that the children would traditionally be in a public school system are the worst times a year for us to actually be doing school. And sometimes where they'd be out or on vacation are some of the best times of the year for us to actually homeschool. And by that I mean, harvest season. As we're getting into September and even trailing into October, it's kind of all hands on deck around the homestead. But the middle of the summer, when it's hot in the middle of the day and nobody hardly even wants to go out and play, that's a great time to be doing some schoolwork.
As is midwinter when the days are long.
As is midwinter is a great way.
We're not outside at all.
Yeah, days are short, nights are long.
So you have flexibility, and you need to be meeting the state requirements. You need to be providing a good education. There's a lot of flexibility, and people are going to need that because most of us that chose to homeschool a long time ago, we set our lives up for it.
Yes.
We planned for that. Now there's a lot of you thinking about homeschooling where your lives haven't been set up for that, and you're gonna try to figure out how to do this. And it may not be a perfect world. Know that it's okay to have some flexibility. You need to figure out how to meet goals, but you can work on shaping it into your life. And I think it's just helpful to take a little bit of the fear and the tension out of it, that this can be done, and you don't have to do everything, like you said, just textbook school system.
Now, one thing I do want to say about this, though, and this is a tip from a old seasoned homeschooling mom, is that you need to try to create some consistency in your day. So even if you're saying, hey, we're going to throw out the regular school schedule and we're not going to start school till noon every day because we're going to do X, Y, and Z in the morning, whatever it is that works for you, try to create a consistent schedule out of that so that everybody knows what to expect. It helps all of us, honestly. It helps our brains to be ready to turn on at a certain amount of time and start thinking. But it helps children when they know what to expect and they have some predictability to their days.
Yeah, and that's just a good life principle that's absolutely necessary on the homestead to get things done. And this isn't a, minute by minute, everything has to be planned out perfectly. No. Some of you are going to operate better on that.
Yeah.
But you do need to provide some structure. We have pretty good structure, but we don't stress too hard about everything being, on the hour or whatever it is. Right. But that keeps that consistency going.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
So you want to move through our list here?
Yeah, moving on. There are a lot of different types of homeschooling. Don't think that homeschooling is only the traditional sit down and open some textbooks. Now, that honestly is what we do. We have, textbooks that we love to use and different programs that we love to use with the kids, and we have hours of the day that are school days. And if they don't get their work done within that, they have kind of homework that they have to do at their free time later. So we kind of have a more traditional approach.
Let me just interject in here real quick, because people are going to right off ask about books.
Yes.
And we have a past Pantry Chat, I believe, that talks about that. And so we'll link to that below, because we're not going into books or specific types of curriculum today, but we do have some resource on that. So look for that link down below if you want to check that out.
But there are a lot of different options that can make homeschooling work for you, or just work for your personality type. Or maybe if you're a parent and you feel like maybe you didn't have the best education, so you question whether you can provide a thorough education for your children, there are great options out there, including
Well, that's just a very, very good point that
Yeah.
you bring up, is that a lot of people say, well, I can't homeschool. I'm not educated enough, or I wasn't trained. There are so many resources today. It's going to take a little work digging in, but you can find programs that will help you.
There are fully digital programs. There are programs you can get that are on CD-ROM for your computer, and they do everything. There are internet programs now, completely digitized. They even have teachers that show up, and your children can interface with live teachers who are checking on their progress, checking their grades. So there's a lot of different options in that way. There are co-ops.
Right.
This is more of a local thing where you would get together with other people in your area and do homeschool co-ops where different parents are teaching different classes.
Yeah, different subjects.
And different subjects. And there's even homeschool groups where it is more like one teacher teaching and giving assignments for the whole week. You go home, you do those things at home, your child paces themselves, and you come back get together to meet with that teacher to check in with them. So there are a ton of different options, and that's only a few of them. There's all sorts of them out there that I'm not even aware of. They're just very many.
And just one more in this vein is it doesn't just have to be one teacher. It doesn't just have to be mom, which seems to be what it usually is, or just dad, which we've seen as well. And what we've set up is Carolyn is doing all of the elementary schooling, and then as they're moving into high school, then I am taking over the high school. Now, we still work together on both and confer with each other and talk about curriculums and decisions, but that's, especially in our family, with as many kids as we have, that helps spread out the load a little bit.
Yes.
And so just another idea to consider and how to make it doable. All right, so choose some curriculum that meets your needs. Curricula.
Yes. Curricula. Curriculums. Yeah, so you can and you want to choose curricula that is going to work for you, for your family, for your personality, for your child's learning type. There are a lot out there, and what I want to tell you right now is that it may take you a while to land on the one that you're just in love with. I know it did for me. I had to go through several different things. I tried to stick with one thing at least through a whole season. And before I found something that just really worked for our household, for my personality type as the teacher, and for the learning styles of the kids that we had. And so one of the things, though, of course, that you want, and this is probably very intuitive, is a really good foundational education. Make sure whatever you choose is really strong in the basics. Because if your children have a good, strong, basic foundational education, they're going to be able to go on and learn all the extra stuff, all the fancy stuff. But if they have just a really solid education, reading, writing, math, they can go a long ways with the other things. So just make sure that that is what your curricula is really, really strong in and is going to teach them what they need to know.
And I think that you would probably want to add art into that.
Absolutely.
Because you've always focused heavily on art, especially at the young ages. That's good for their minds. That balances out the left brain, right brain.
Right.
Whatever form of art it is.
Yeah.
I know that's been important to us and is important to a lot of educational systems.
Right. Well, and of course you want science and social studies in their history.
Right.
But I think for me, when I'm choosing the curricula, I'm looking to make sure that it's the reading, writing, and the math that is really, really solid. And the other things, I'm not going to judge the whole curricula so much on their science program.
Well, and maybe just real quick, we should let people know, for us, and the way we're pretty independent, you went about trying, you didn't just do an overall curricular for all of schooling, which they have. There's a lot of that.
Yeah.
You picked things that worked for you and for the kids.
By subject.
By subject. Now, that may work for some of you. Some of you may need an overall solution, whether it's because it's digital or because this just seems to work for you. So take your time, but know that you can do that, because for a lot of people that are really getting thrown into this, they're probably going to need a system in place.
Yes.
It may be hard to take the few years that you took to kind of dial it in. So know that even with that, go into it, give it a year, and if it's not working, you can try something else. But there are systems there that are in place, probably more than we know, because we've been going so for a while. You've developed your system and we're rolling with it.
Right.
And
so there's really good curricula sets that you can buy that have everything you need for one grade. They cover all the subjects. They have everything. And I know one that comes to mind for me that I have thought about using, but we've never needed to, is another one of the Mennonite and Amish curricula. If you watch our other videos on homesteading, you know that the curricula we've chosen is predominantly from a Mennonite background or Amish background. We're not either, but they give a really, really good foundational education in the elementary years. And their subject matter that they talk about is often very farm related, and so our children identify with it a lot. So we've really enjoyed that. But there is one that is Rod and Staff, and they have full year curricula packs where you can just get everything you need for grade 4. And that can be really helpful for you if you just don't know where to start and you want to jump into something.
Well, and I got to tell you, getting into the high school side of it, and we've decided to go with those, a few of those. Yeah, because a lot of people think, well, that's a very limited education because mostly they stop at 8th grade. I'll tell you what, the 8th grade and below stuff, blows most junior highs away. And I know getting into high school and particularly the math and the grammar, English, the English stuff blows away, the 9th and 10th grade English blows away anything you and I did in college.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a very, very strong
so
education.
Don't discredit them for that because there's just very solid foundation
Absolutely.
there. Yeah. Well, we better keep moving on. So some additions here, moving away from curricula.
Right.
And on to other parts of education that you wanted to include.
Yeah, technically these are called hidden curricula is the term for it in the educational circles. These are things that you arrange to be educational without being directly on paper in front of you, written down sort of things. So this is where combining a homesteading life with a homeschooling life really shines, because you can learn so much just about your daily chores on a homestead. But other things that are really important are getting out and doing things in person. This is one of the huge factors in whether somebody will be a good lifelong reader or not, surprisingly. And the reason for that is the more experiences you have in person, the more you can connect to a written word about those experiences. So, if you're reading about an ocean and you've never been to an ocean, you're not going to connect as strongly as if you're reading about it and you've been there before and you can picture yourself there. So getting out and doing things, whether it's field trips, vacation trips with a little educational or just experiencing new things, is so incredibly valuable from an educational point of view. Same thing with getting your hands into different activities, sewing, cooking, mucking out the barn, milking the cow, playing with fuzzy baby chicks.
Construction projects, building things, taking things apart, and whether that's a house, a building, a car, a computer, all of those things, even on an experimental level, is fantastic for the mind.
It also helps you develop strong problem-solving skills, which is going to carry you through a lot of educational moments where you need to figure things out well. If you have problem-solving skills that are developed in real life, you're going to be able to apply those to academic subjects, whereas it's not always true the other way around, right? Just because you can solve a math problem on paper doesn't mean you're going to be able to figure out what to do when the car falls apart or something like that. So journaling about those things is a wonderful, wonderful thing too. Just bringing in all of those real life, real skill, real experiences is incredibly valuable for homeschooling.
Yeah,
any schooling.
Absolutely.
Right.
And starting to wrap it up, this core philosophical surrounding that we bunch all this into is...
help your children absolutely love learning.
Absolutely. If they love learning, they will do well. If they enjoy reading, if they can read and they like to read and they like learning, exploring new things, they're going to go learn and explore and find out and do whatever in life they're passionate about doing.
Absolutely.
That just is fundamental. So try to make sure in the stress of this, and particularly in this day and time when a lot of you may be getting pushed into this, and you decide to go down this road, hopefully you get excited about it, but help the kids be excited about it and do things that turn it into an event that is exciting. Not drudgery, we've got to do this, but how can we turn this into a positive? How can we make this a positive experience and make it exciting and fun? Not like every day is always fun and laughing, but that the overall experience is a good experience.
It should be a good experience.
That we're producing people that love to learn.
And homeschooling is so good for that because you can slow down, you can ease the pressure off of a child and work with them one-on-one until they can get a concept in a way that makes sense to them. And just being able to drop that pressure down alone can help children love to learn instead of being in this highly pressurized, I have to, the test is coming up, I have to meet this grade sort of circumstance. And so that is just such a wonderful thing for helping children learn how to love. You can also tailor the education to their particular likes and dislikes. If they're super interested in dinosaurs, hey, let's do dinosaur math. That's great. You can make it fun for them in that sort of way. The other thing, though, aside from teaching your children to love learning, which is actually more like allowing your children to love learning, don't squish the desire to learn, is teaching your children to be successful in what they do. Success is actually a skill that people learn. It's a skill of learning not to give up. How do I approach this from a different angle? The problem solving. And if you help them to be successful in little small things and celebrate those successes, it starts giving them an appetite for learning how to be successful in the larger things.
And it can do attitude, and an attitude that can push through, because everything's got trials, everything's got challenges and difficult. Is the mindset when they approach something just, oh, I'm not going to be able to do this, this is going to be too hard, or this or that? Is that the mindset? Or is the mindset is, I can do this, I'll figure it out. You know, and that's been key. That's been key to, for us, building this homesteading life, to building several businesses, to the different things we've done. And that's just really important for all life. It's
more important than getting the perfect grade. It's more important than getting through every bit of a curriculum. It's more important than all of that. If they come away knowing how to be successful and loving learning, then you've done a great job.
Well, hey guys, we could talk about this subject for a long time, and we've covered what we can today. If you want to leave us questions below, we've got a Q&A coming up, and if there's enough consistent questions, maybe we'll do another 1 or 2 on this over the summer, because we know a lot of people are dealing with this and thinking about it. So leave us your questions below.
Absolutely.
And next week,
we are going to be covering Food Preservation 101. We're going to be talking about the different methods of preserving food so that you can get more food up on your shelf this season.
All right, you guys, good hanging with you. We will see you next time.
Goodbye.
Bye.